Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The college football playoff rankings just get released last night. The Georgia Bulldogs come in as the number 2 team in the country, the back-to-back national champs, undefeated in 2023, coming off a massive win against the Florida Gators where they look like the dominant team that we've seen the last 2 years. I'm not going to do you think Kirby Smart is sitting up there and cares at all whether they're number 1, number 2, or number 3? In fact, I think Kirby Smart might even be happy that they come in as the number 2 team in the country, because that's bulletin board material around the locker room all week heading into this Missouri game. But I want to take a deep dive into talking about this Georgia team and why they are still so special, and what is happening in Athens is really a special dynasty being created. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Georgia fans. Every game preview we do from Georgia, so much Go Dogs in the comment section. You guys have shown a ton of support. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from the Georgia fans how we're feeling about number 2 team in the country. I don't think Kirby cares that much. They're going to have plenty of chances to get that number 1 spot. But I do want to talk about why this Georgia team just continues to get a little disrespected. Now, the first thing I want to point out, the narratives that have been surrounding this Georgia team just continue to get dispelled, right? For the beginning of the season, this offense don't look like it was under Stetson Bennett, as if they weren't working in a new starting quarterback and a new offensive play caller. Carson Beck in this Georgia offense look like it's one of the best offenses in the country. We'll dive into it in a little bit. The next narrative that came up was this Georgia team is too reliant on Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, and that is absolutely no disrespect to Brock Bowers, but there are a lot of other playmakers on this team that can make plays. Dominic Lovett, Lad McConkey, Oscar Dell. People who don't follow recruiting don't know Georgia has plenty of 5-star talent in that tight end position that's waiting in the wings for when Brock Bowers is no longer in Athens. So these narratives that Georgia it doesn't have a great offense this year, or is too reliant on Brock Bowers, continue to get dispelled. But I want to take just a second to appreciate how dominant this Georgia team has been, specifically the last couple of weeks. You look at their overall offensive numbers, they are averaging 39.4 points per game. That is 8th in the country. Top 10 scoring offense. They're averaging 7 yards per play. That's number 6 in the country. They're number 1 in third down conversion percentage. This Georgia offense is just as good, if not better, than some of the offenses that we've seen in the past for Georgia. And what I think is most important, and what I think is so optimistic for Georgia fans, especially what you saw against Florida, is this offensive line looks back to the offensive line that we kind of expected heading into the year. And I think there were some growing pains, and obviously they were banged up. But you take a look at establishing the line of scrimmage, doing what Georgia wants to do. They are running the ball 5 yards per carry. That is 25th in the country. I'm a Michigan fan. Michigan is 33rd in the country. They're only averaging 4.7 yards per carry. So the narrative is Michigan can run on anyone. Georgia is running the football better than Michigan right now, and I feel like people just want to ignore that fact. If you're a Georgia fan and you go back, and I watched that Florida-Georgia game a couple times back now, I think what you have to be most excited for, and there's a lot of things to be excited for in that game, this offensive line looks to be kind of rounding into that elite best unit in the country. And I said it last year, it's probably the best. Hey, Michigan won the Joe Moore Award, but this Georgia offensive line has been elite for the last couple of years. But Tate Ratledge, Cedric Van Pran, they are starting to find their rhythm, and that's without Marius Mims, who might be their best offensive lineman on the team, who's still working back from injury. So you look at this offensive line and how dominant they were against the Florida Gators. That's what you have to be most excited for, and equally excited for is Carson Beck continues to take steps and how comfortable he looks back there. Carson Beck is in total command of this offense. His throws are coming out on time, accurate, in rhythm. He knows where he needs to go with the football almost every single play. He's getting good protection from the offensive line. And then the second part is the wide receivers, the narrative that they were too reliant on Brock Bowers. Yeah, they were relying on Brock Bowers because he's arguably the best pass catcher in the entire country. Of course, you're going to go to him plenty. But without Brock Bowers, you saw plenty of guys step up, right? Lad McConkey, banged up in the beginning of the year. He's emerging as that go-to guy, as well as Dominic Lovett. If you're a Georgia fan and you see Dominic Lovett and Lad McConkey, you could throw Oscar Delp in there getting involved. What's this offense going to look like when you have Brock Bowers back for the end of the year? So now you're looking at Brock Bowers, Dominic Lovett, Lad McConkey. This is arguably, and we've seen some good wide receiver play from Georgia, the most talented pass catcher group that we've seen for the Georgia Bulldogs when they are all healthy. That when you look at this Georgia team, they've been so solid. And again, that passing attack, Carson Beck is fourth in the country with a 73% completion percentage. But what's even more crazy than that, he's top 15 in the country in yards per pass. So not only is he completing a lot of footballs, pushing the ball down the field, hitting explosive plays through the air. And that's what you want this Georgia team to look like. They can run the football on anybody, and then they can hit the explosive pass with Carson Beck averaging 9.1 yards per pass attempt. This is the Georgia team that is, and I looked at my brother when we were watching this game live and said, this is the Georgia team that can go win a national title. I don't know if you were saying that week 3, week 4, but you're certainly saying that after what you saw them do to the Florida Gators. Now, moving to the defensive side of the ball, it's been very similar. And I think the narrative heading in on defense is they don't necessarily have that game wrecker, a Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis or Devontae Wyatt that they've had in the past. And I'll grant it, maybe that's true, right? You look on that defensive line, I think Mikael Williams can be that guy, but do they have a Jalen Carter on the defensive line this year? Probably not. But what they do have is that whole defensive line is going to be playing in the NFL when they are eligible to play, right? Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson. These guys, yeah, they're not going to be top 10 picks in the NFL draft, but they're deep and they're talented still on that defensive line. But when I look at it, and this is a defense that's still, 15.9 points per game scored on them. That's seventh in the country. Only 4.5 yards per play against them. That's top 10 in the country. You look at this Georgia defense, and although doesn't have the headliner top 10 pick like a Jordan Davis or a Jalen Carter or a Nolan Smith, it's still a very, very good Georgia defense. But what I think is kind of the strength of this unit is this is the best secondary we've seen from Georgia, right? Is it the best front seven we've seen from the Georgia Bulldogs in the last couple of years? No, but we've seen, some generational front sevens the last 2 years under Kirby Smart. The secondary, I think this is the best unit in college football. Kamari Lassiter, NFL guy. Javon Bullard, NFL guy. Malachi Starks, NFL guy. Tyke Smith has been playing at another level for the Georgia Bulldogs. No disrespect to Dalen Everett. He's probably the last guy you'd mention, but he's still playing at an extremely high level as well. This Georgia secondary, you look at them, they're allowing 5.4 yards per pass, top 5 in the country. So you look at this Georgia defense, and again, the narrative heading in was they lost some guys to the NFL who were real game wreckers. I'll grant you that. But they still have just such a talented team. And if you're Georgia, you look at that Florida game, you saw Marvin Jones Jr., Jalen Walker, like the cupboards are stock full too. And that's what's been so special about this Georgia team. Yes, they have that NFL talent. They're also extremely deep. And you ask, why can they continue to replace all the NFL guys that they lose? It's because they have a guy like Jalen Walker, who's only a sophomore, but could be playing on most Power 5 teams across the country. So even when these guys leave, you're still looking at a loaded Georgia defense. And Georgia, they've been extremely banged up, but why have they been continuing to win games? Because they have so much talent in the back end. Again, a Michigan fan, and I think a lot of college football fans, including myself at times, try to convince yourself that this Georgia team might be a down year for Georgia. And they're trying to convince themselves that other teams have a chance to go out and win a national title. And although this Georgia team is not it's not invincible, well, I think most Georgia fans would admit that this is still a Georgia team that is continuing the dynasty that's building in Athens. And as a Michigan fan, what I saw from Georgia on Saturday against the Florida Gators, it didn't make me feel great about Michigan's opportunity to win a national championship. I'm looking forward. I hope we get Georgia, but this Georgia team is starting to find its form. Number 2 in the country. I think that's fine. I think Georgia fans might, again, be even happy with that because now you got that chip. As if this Georgia team needed a chip on their shoulder, now they might have that chip. They're going to be locked in for the back half. And at the end of the day, you talk about potential seeding in the college football playoffs. If Georgia runs the table, they're not going to be the number 2 team in the country, right? You got Missouri this weekend, top 15 team in the college football playoff rankings. You got Ole Miss. You go on the road to Tennessee. All three of these teams are top 20 teams in the college football playoff rankings. Georgia has plenty of time to build that resume, but what you're seeing from this Georgia team, they sure do look like that number one team in the country. Georgia fans, you got to be pumped again. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. The amount of support from the Georgia fans, it does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, go check out our Georgia-Missouri game preview. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.